All right, folks, we are back here on WLTH 1370 AM, 92.7 in the FM dial. This is Straight Out of the Cannon with me, Scott Cannon, here breaking down the debate to the very last compound. See how that sound? A little unrational. A lot of MCs like to use the word dramatical. Yes, it is 6:49 in the PM here on June 28th, 2024. The future is here. The future is now, humans. Yes, it is. Before we left, I told you guys that this segment, I wanted to get into Project 2025. Yes, this is what the Democrats have been fear-mongering about Donald Trump being able to do if he was reelected. And so I, being the honorable beacon of truth that I try to be, went to look into exactly what the project was and whether it is exactly as scary as they say. And let me just say, it's not scary. Anyway, Project 2025 is also known as the Presidential Transition Project. Now, what is Project 2025 or the Presidential Transition Project? It is basically a bunch of policy proposals from the right-wing think tanks like the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is the right-wing think tank that is responsible for the moral majority and the Reagan Revolution and all those people back in the 70s and the 80s. They're the most powerful right-wing Republican think tank. Them and I think the Cato Institute really are the most powerful Republican think tanks. Now, the whole purpose of Project 2025, or the Presidential Transition Project, as it's also known, is to reshape the government of the United States in the event of the Republicans winning the election in 2024. Now, it was established 2 years ago, and the reason that it has gained the type of notoriety that it has is because they're telling you how they intend on basically reforming and reshaping the American government. They want to reclassify thousands of federal civil servant jobs as political appointees, and they want to replace them with loyal Republicans to basically further the objectives of Donald Trump if he gets elected. They also adopt the most extreme, most maximalist version of the unitary executive theory, which is a disputed interpretation of Article 2 of the Constitution that states that the president has absolute power over the executive branch upon inauguration. Now, a lot of people who are critics of Project 2025 said that this is authoritarian. Can't blame them for thinking that. Christian nationalists plan to turn the United States into an autocracy. There are experts and laws and even other conservatives who say that it would undermine the rule of law and the separation of powers and individual rights and freedoms. Project 2025 basically envisions widespread change that the FBI agree with. Good for them. They also want to dismantle the Department of Homeland Security. Again, I kind of understand that one as well. They want to sharply reduce environmental and climate change regulations to favor fossil fuel productions. Well, this isn't really that's not that different than what Joe Biden's doing now. Joe Biden has actually expanded drilling in the Arctic and the Gulf since he's been president. A lot of people don't know that. The liberal media doesn't like to talk about that. But the Biden administration actually handed out more drilling permits in the Arctic than even Donald Trump did. And Obama expanded drilling too, which they also don't tell you about. And that's what the whole the pipeline protests were about all those years ago. But that's neither here nor there. They want to eliminate the Department of Commerce. They want to end the independence of federal agencies like the FCC and the Federal Trade Commission. Now, the FCC is what controls our media. It's one of the reasons that I don't one of the worst things to happen was the Telecommunications Act of 1996 under Bill Clinton, when he basically handed over our media over to the corporate elites. The FCC was a big part of that. And the FTC, we talked about the FTC on this show not too long ago when I talked about Lena Khan. The only good thing that Joe Biden's done in his life is appoint Lena Khan to being the head of the FTC. It would be absolutely damaging to lose her, and because she's been great at holding corporations accountable and going after corporations, it really, like I said, I've told you here, I do not look forward to vote. I don't intend to vote for Joe Biden, but I give credit where credit is due. His pick of Lena Khan to lead the FTC is the best thing he has ever done in his life. She's the best presidential appointment I've seen. I did a whole video about it. Go to my YouTube page, Scott Cannon Radio. We simplified it. Scott Cannon Radio on YouTube. Go look it up. It's only from about a month or two ago. I did a whole video talking about how valuable she has been in fighting back against corporate power. They want to institute tax cuts. Obviously, for the rich, they want to extend the Trump tax cuts, which was actually the most unpopular thing Trump ever did as president. His absolute nadir of popularity was the day that he passed the tax cuts. But once again, that's plutocracy. Trump didn't care about what the average person thought. The plutocrats wanted their tax cuts, and so Trump gave it to them. They want to eliminate the Department of Education. Yes, they want to eliminate the Department of Education. They want to transfer those programs to other agencies, or those programs will be just terminated. They intend on cutting funding for climate research. They want to reform the National Institution of Health. And so that means rejecting the idea of abortion as health care. They want to eliminate Obamacare's coverage of things like Plan B, which is emergency contraception. The project also is going to pretty overtly institute elements of Christianity into the government. They want to criminalize pornography, which, again, I think the Supreme Court actually ruled on that, so I don't know if the Supreme Court would actually let them do that. But there's been a lot of this is what they tried to do back in the 70s with Hugh Hefner. The Republicans, going back to the 70s and 80s, the moral majority conservatives were always trying to ban pornography. I mean, I remember back in the days, people like the 2 Live Crew and Ozzy Osbourne. Who else am I thinking about? Judas Priest. These people used to have to go to the Supreme Court to argue for the right to make records that were very, I guess, raw, uncensored. Project 2025, I guess, will bring back those type of culture war issues. They want to remove legal protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and terminate all the DEI and affirmative action programs. So that's basically what the Project 2025 goals are at the top. Now, the authors of this project have admitted that most of these proposals would require controlling both chambers of Congress. which is what I always say. It's funny, whenever a Republican's in office, all the liberals start acting like the president is God, right? Oh my God, the president will be able to do whatever the hell he wants because the Republicans can always do whatever the hell they want. Then as soon as a Democrat gets in office, even if he has both chambers of Congress, he's stuck because, oh man, it just so happens that Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema won't go with the program. Most of these programs would require controlling both chambers of Congress. So it's not just if Donald Trump wins, the Republicans have to take over the House and the Senate as well. And as I said earlier, a lot of the plan has been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court and would face a lot of challenges in court. So, while there's definitely a lot to be worried about from this, I think it's important to state that if you come out and vote, even if Joe Biden doesn't necessarily win, but the Democrats can keep control of the House or the Senate or gain the Senate or whatever, then you won't have as much of this. The project actually recommends that we arrest, detain, and deport illegal immigrants living in the United States, which again, like I said, I support deportation personally. The embrace of unfettered immigration is one of the biggest mistakes that the left and liberals and the left have embraced over the last 20 or 30 years. The left in this country was strong. The left in this country was strong when the left was adamantly against mass immigration. You don't have to believe me. Look at the data. Between the 1920s and the 1960s, that's the only period in history in which the incomes of black Americans went up faster, increased faster than everybody else's. Okay? We made more progress between the 1920s and the 1960s than at any point, I guess other than maybe Reconstruction, those few years during Reconstruction, than we have during any sustained period during our time here, the 400 years we've been in America. That's how you end up with the civil rights movement. And it just so happened to happen right after we cut immigration after World War I. After World War I, we basically sealed off America and said, look, we're gonna cut off a lot of this immigration here. And we proceeded to have the best 4 decades that the working class and that black America has ever had. From the 1920s to the 1960s. Organized labor, the best decades that organized labor ever had in this country's history. This is why people like Cesar Chavez, like A. Philip Randolph, the greatest black labor leader. You got the greatest black and the greatest Hispanic labor leaders this country's ever had. They were both hardcore anti-mass immigrationists. You know what I mean? You don't believe me? Go check out A. Philip Randolph, who organized the March on Washington with Martin Luther King. Check out Immigrant Indigestion. Yes, that's the actual name of it. He wrote it, called Immigrant Indigestion, back in the 1930s or the 1940s. Check it out. Okay, that's why people like Ralph Abernathy, Coretta Scott King, all these people also fought hard against illegal immigration. So, again, that one might not be too bad. Project 2025 also promotes capital punishment and the speedy finality of those sentences. Again, that's one of the things that makes the United States really stand out amongst most countries, is that America is very much willing to resort to the sort of barbaric practice of capital punishment. And before somebody calls up and talks about how it is a deterrent, it is not a deterrent. It's not. I'm sorry. Just statistically speaking, it's not a deterrent. We brought the death penalty back in 1976, and violent crime continued to increase, especially murder, for the next 18 years into the mid-90s. So just because the death penalty is there, it doesn't mean people are going to stop killing people. It doesn't mean anybody's going to stop doing anything. In fact, it got worse. From the 1970s to the 1980s to the 1990s, violent crime got much worse after we brought back the death penalty. It is merely there for barbaric purposes. I'm sorry, it does not function the way that people think that it should function. Now, Paul Dans, who is the project's director, has explained that Project 2025 is systemically, listen to how he puts this, systemically preparing to march into office and bring a new army, aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state. He admitted that it was counterintuitive to recruit so many to join the government to shrink it, but pointed out that the need for a future president to regain control of the government. Now, people, particularly liberals, are pushing this idea that Donald Trump is somehow in love with Project 2025. That is only somewhat true. Initially, the campaign said that the project aligned well with their Agent 47 agenda proposals, but the people who wrote Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, are increasingly annoyed with the Trump campaign and that he has generally avoided specific policy proposals that can be used against him. And that's what I've always said about Trump. Trump is not an ideologue. He's a con artist. Trump has no values. He has no morals. He has no beliefs. None. He is an empty husk. He's like a shark. You know what I mean? Trump is basically like a shark. A shark is just moving forward, eating. He's not thinking about whether he's hurting anybody. He doesn't care whether he eats you, your grandmother, the guy down the street, your little girl, anything. He's just eating. That's what a shark does. If you fall in the water, I'm going to eat you. And that's really what Trump is. I've always said that liberals make a huge mistake by characterizing Trump as some sort of fascist who just has all these, designs for America. Trump is a con artist, above all else. He doesn't have beliefs. He doesn't have morals. He's not Hitler. He's not Mussolini. He's Silvio Berlusconi. He's a slimy billionaire who, wants to cavort with porn stars and models and, have people afraid of him on some level and be in awe of him in other levels. He's an extreme megalomaniac, egomaniac, but he's not ideologically driven. And so the Project 2025 authors and a lot of these people at the Heritage Foundation are very much sort of annoyed that Trump won't just come out and endorse their plan for crypto Christian fascism and completely turning the American government inside out. Whereas again, Trump does what he always does. He just evades and keeps moving forward. Now, who is the Project 2025 Advisory Board? It basically is a broad coalition of over 80 conservative organizations. That's how they describe it. Mostly think tanks, as well as several universities and the American Conservative magazine. As of February of 2024, this project has over 100 partner organizations. So, that's what they are. Let me get this call before I go to a break. Hello, caller.
Well, good afternoon. Good evening.
What's up?
Well, I was thinking about the whole situation about the heritage.
Mm-hmm.
They're fundamental Christians, right? They're kind of Calvinist type.
Mm.
And if you want to understand the beginnings of their concept, go back to around 1670, 1680. Go back there and look and see what kind of law changes were made to slavery and how humans were labeled the way they are today then, And I'll bet you could go back to the heritage and find connection to the way they're supporting what they think of as original foundative wording. So by their terminology, just like the Baptists of the old, they had something. They used the Bible to justify slavery.
Yep.
And so these people are trying to regain control of the scenario. And Mr. Trump, while he's not Adolf or any of those other guys, he's kind of like, he's just a con. But wherever the money goes, that's what greases his way.
Yep.
And so these guys, the heritage guys, are deep in their stuff. And believe me, this thing about getting rid of public schools has been going on for 50 years. We just kind of know about it in the last 10 or 15. Maybe. But there's been an absolute thing to privatize our government since the 70s, deep in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it is. And by the way, when you talk about Homeland Security,
yep.
Now I was just reading this the other day. The defense budget for like 2023 was $386 billion, right? And when I asked the next figure, well, how do you include the other 17 security agencies? It came up into the trillions that they wouldn't even quote. Mm. So when you talk about, imagine you're making a really good, decent income. You're making, let's say we're making $150,000 a year, but we're spending $70,000 of it on security.
Mm-hmm.
Think that's what we're doing. America's doing right now. Mm. And then we're promoting all these conflicts by being the heavy-handed policemen.
Yep.
And we're hurting innocent people, and eventually their children are going to come back, and that's what these people are afraid of. And so they're reestablishing that old law from the 1680s that gives them the right to have their superiority. And we don't know that mostly. So how do you defend yourself against a foe you don't even know you don't even know its base, you don't know its operation? So we're busy talking about making sure we don't drink, or we fasten our state belt, or hey, by the way, make sure you're good to the squirrel. But after that, just mind your own business. Anyway.
Right. Hey, thank you for your call, brother. Thank you for your call.
Have a great day.
It's all good. Yeah. We're going to get back into Project 2025 coming up here. We're already past the hour, so you guys know what time it is. It's time for the Happy Happies. Yes, it is. We'll be right back here on WLTH 1370 AM. Be right back after these.